So, it's time to analyze the session's most interesting hands. And these hands are all going to be knockout sit and goes, and we'll also try to analyze if knockouts are going to influence the optimal play. And as we see that our session was pretty much awesome. So there were like solid 8.6 buy-ins won during the 12 games, so that's something like 66% ROI. And even with EV adjusted, it's over 20%, so we just had an awesome run in total. Let's go for my reports for the hands, and let's see if there is something interesting. I'll start the HRC as well too. And this is the Queen 7 suited that should we be shoving here. And there will be some added value on this Volteren's call. That when he calls and gets eliminated just by us, it's going to increase our equity in this situation. So let's go for the view hand details. Let's copy the hand for the almighty HRC. And this is pretty much the basic that Queen 7 suited is not a shove against Nash ranges. Now there's the question of when there is the 60 cent when there is the 60 cent bounty on Volteren, and that's going to be the 60 cent bounty. The prize pool in this tournament, it's going to be around $23. So if we would always get the bounty would be worth about 3%. The bounty would be worth about 3% of the prize pool. So every time we are getting to the leaf that the Volteren calls, so 27% of the time, and with Queen 7 off, this is going to be nasty to do live, but we can estimate it a bit. I think Nash is going to be quite sensible in this situation. If we are looking for 9.6% range, that's going to be about the range that I think that the general opponent would call. I don't think that... And the Volteren's calling range, I think the shape might change towards more of the bigger cards and include some of the aces and not include some of the... Not include all of the suited hands. But let's go for a quick analyze on Queen 7 off. It's going to... So we are getting about 2.5% if we are getting always the... If we are getting 1 in 3, we are getting about 0.8. And that happens only 27% of the time. It's about 0.2 that we are getting increased equity in this situation because we are having a larger stack. So if we are having this like this exact situation with Queen 7 suited, it's going to be, if the ranges are correct, I think it's going to be so close to break even. Oh, it was Queen 7 suited, so then it's slightly better. It's going to be 37%. Yeah. But even with 27%, I think it's like the minus 0.20 of the prize pool might turn into like plus 0.03. So it's going to be really close. I think like Queen 6 suited would also be a shove in this situation because of the added bounty on the big blind. And also it's going to make this situation really hard to analyze because always when we are changing the Voltaren's range, it's going to affect the calculations. And we can of course, we saw the hands, and when this guy calls, I don't think Voltaren should call with much. And he didn't. And we are losing a ton of equity in this situation, so this is something that the red line does not like. Let's see, then there were some of the other, like pocket fours. With 10 big blinds deep, I think that we would need to have something like pocket sixes or pocket sevens. Even against a pretty wide range. I think like our opponent can shove something like 70% here. Did you follow my thought process on how to quickly estimate the amount of how the equity changes with the knockouts on the previous hands? Because we are having the short stacked opponent in the big blind. And in this situation it was like 57%, and then we can call with sixes plus. I think sixes plus is going to be like a solid hand. Let's see, sixes, fives and fours, and let's graph them. Like fours is good if the opponent is shoving 85% or more. The pocket fives is good if opponent is shoving 60% or more. And pocket sixes is good if opponent is shoving 40% or more. And I think like most opponents are shoving. And it's also good to see like the pocket sixes are not horrible if the opponent is shoving only 25%. And I think like almost all the opponents are shoving like any ace, any Broadway, any pocket pair. So I think like pocket sixes in this situation would be a really solid call. That was a quick one. I forgot that I got all of these in the one replayer. And this was the Queen Jack off. I'm not good with clicking today. And this was about 7 big blinds, and actually I think that Caleon might be correct. I'm usually trying to mentally adjust my ranges on these situations because I'm more used to playing with antes, so then I'm always trying to mentally, now I need to be tighter, but then how much tighter? And Queen Jack off is going to be if players are playing close to Nash, which I think is giving pretty good estimation. I think this guy was more of a nitty guy, so we need to edit him down a bit. But even that way, I think that we are going to be... The Queen Jack off is going to be a bit better. So I think that it would have been a good shove. And also that we should adjust the calling ranges because of the bounty. That's correct, and that means that we are unlocking his range, and we are not getting bounties out of any other player than the Joseph. And there will be some players, I think also these guys are... Actually, we don't need to adjust that much of the ranges, because even when we shove, we are getting protected, our shove is protected by the fact that these players that are from the button, small blind and big blind, they need to pretty much risk their whole stack if they are willing to call us. So I don't think that opponents are going to be calling us that wide in this general situation. Yeah, this is with a one depth future game simulation. I think that it's something that we would need to increase to 2. Let's recalculate. Because with 2 we are getting a closer approximation on how much we are losing to the blinds. I think that even with future game simulation, it only thinks about your next 2 hands. But even when you are like 7 big blinds deep, on average you are having something like 7 or 8 hands. And the bigger the stack you have, the better options you have, so I think the value is going to be quite close. It's like 0.04, 0.03. The 2 or 3 hand FGS does not make a whole lot of difference in here. And actually, I don't think that we would need to adjust that much of those calling ranges, just because of the stack situation, and I think that we are quite close to the quite what I would expect to see in these situations. Like this Narsby can be wider, but that's just because the player is in generally wider. What does ICM say without FGS? Let's look. It's quick to look. It would then make the Queen Jack off a completely break-even spot. I think shoving is better in this situation, so even when it's a close spot, in general in this situation when it's a close spot, I think it's a close and positive spot. And if it's a close and a positive spot, or if it's a plus EV spot, even if it's a slightly plus EV spot, I think that it's going to be better for us to have a bigger stack. Like, if we are having a break-even option of either being out, stealing for a larger stack, or getting really a bigger stack, I think it's going to be more of a mistake to fold than to shove, so... But it's close, Then there is the pocket fours. This is something nasty, because there's a guy that has like 15 times more than this, and there are no antes. I think like this is, even if our opponents would know that we are having a smallish pocket pair, I don't think that the opponents are going to adjust to it correctly most of the time. Now we are back at ICM. But I don't want ICM, I want my future game simulation. And actually I don't want my future game simulation because this is an advanced hand. So I need to be doing a 3-bet simulation that's going to be an advanced hand simulation. And I get reminded of that from Calleon and Neo. But I want my FGS. These advanced hands take so long to calculate that with FGS it's going to be... It would be pretty insane. And we are in here. I don't think that our opponent, if he's min raising away of a tighter range. Let's now try to make a range that our opponent would min raise. He's about 20 big blinds deep, so he's going to be min raise most of his range. I think in general guys are going to be min raising less than Nash, but the ranges are going to look slightly unoptimal. This is too much. I think in general I would need to get close to 10%. Because that's something I would expect to see. That would be probably pretty close to what I'm expecting from an opponent to min raise about 20 big blinds deep. And chip leader for the layman, what's different using FGS? FGS stands for Future Game Simulation, and it calculates a certain amount of hands in the future. And it calculates if everybody is playing perfect shove fold poker, what would the equities be after a certain amount of hands. And it takes it into account to adjust the ranges for this exact hand. And Calleon, yeah, that's correct. It would need to be the other way around. Sorry about that. I did misread it a bit. And if our range that our opponent is raising is something like this, so there will be a bit more suited, but not enough. Compared to ICM, it's going to be a bit too much aces. But if we are thinking about this kind of range, if we are thinking about this kind of range, we are seeing something strange. Like the pocket jacks against this kind of range would be unprofitable, but all of the smaller pocket pairs would be profitable. If the opponent is going to be calling with just that, I think in general opponents are calling closer to something like that, if they are opening. So let's reshake the ideas again. And small blind is going to be calling too much. And if we are seeing that our opponent is opening tighter than Nash and he's going to be calling slightly wider than Nash, we have there is nothing we should be doing in this pot with pocket fours. And this is also, I think this is something that, like right now I have been playing a lot of three-handed and two-handed games where the ranges are a lot wider. So when the ranges are a lot wider, when it's always about button versus small blind versus big blind or small blind versus big blind, the ranges are so much wider than in this situation when there are 6 players and like UTG plus 1. And actually it's UTG plus 1, not UTG. So perhaps I can like screw everything up in this hand analysis. I think there are still a few ideas on how to screw it up, so I wonder if I do see it. And because it's going to be MP, it's going to be slightly wider. Not a lot, but slightly wider. And Calleon, yeah, I noticed. That's always nice to see that you are like completely wrong. It's going to be better against the MP. It's going to be better. I still think that when I'm looking it through, actually when we are adding the equity on like it's about 35% to get against an opponent. And how much we are getting equity on? Our equity is going to be so terrible with pocket fours against our equity isn't that terrible with the ace kings in the range as well. So 35% times about 30%, that's going to be about 10%. And about 10% of about 10% chance, about 10% chance of getting a bounty worth about 2.5 to 3%. It's like 0.025 to 0.0.3. That's going to get even pocket fours to be really close. And chip leader future game simulations, I don't get it. You are using Nash ranges, and how can you adjust those? It already implies that your opponents are playing those as well. That's going to be just an additional tool to make ICM work better in situations that you can't just easily see the situation. Like ICM doesn't take position into account at all. And it has been proven with simulations that FGS is a more solid model than ICM by itself. It just requires a lot more calculation. I think like if you are comparing to two players playing perfectly and one player is playing ICM and one player is playing FGS, and we are having a tournament that opens with I think 20 big blinds deep and it's only shove or fold. The player that plays FGS is having something like 0.25% of ROI. If I remember correctly what the Hold'em Resources calculator developer has written somewhere. And Neo said that it basically makes some minus CV shoves positive because of the future equity you get when you win. And Neo also on the other side, it makes some plus EV shoves, minus EV shoves. Because of the future equity that you are going to lose if you are shoving and you are losing. Like, so it's an adjustment, and like if you are saying like how to adjust those FGS ranges, and that's going to be a really hard situation. Like if we are thinking about FGS in general, if we are thinking FGS one hand into the future, we are like all of these leaves, or let's take this as a basic hand, then it shows it better how the FGS works. And now that this is going to go slightly inception, or so we need to look at all of these leaves. So in this situation we are having like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, actually 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. And there are 46 leaves, and out of those, there are only 5 leaves that you know the stack sizes instantly. On all of the others, the stack sizes might be 3 different, so FGS needs to calculate for the next hand about 120 new hands. If you are going deeper than that, like this is now 6-handed and it needs 120 more hands to calculate. So when we are going deeper than that, like if we are going to 2 hands, then it requires 120 hands squared, so it's like 10,000 times more. And if we are looking at something like 5 hand into the future, then it's like 120 to the power of 5. So and Neo said that Arnie will travel back in time if depth is too high. You'll need a good computer, that's for sure. And there might be like, you are thinking that this shouldn't take long, this is just a simple calculation, one number. But when we are talking about powers, like we are talking about getting to squared, then you will know that the amounts they are rising so quickly. So that like, if it's a really quick hand to look for the one hand, if you are needing to see just 3 hands into the future, you are doing million times as many calculations. So let's let that sink in a bit. But that's only that what you do is getting the future game simulation from 0 to 3, and you are increasing the amount of required calculations to about a millionfold. So, but of course, when Hold'em Resources calculator is pretty quick to calculate a single situation, calculating even a million situations isn't that much of a problem if you have time, like 10 minutes. But if you are going deeper than that, like 100 million for the next round, it's going to it's going to take a while. Then it's like the 120 times 10 minutes and then it takes hours. 20 hours. And then that's only getting from FGS 3 to FGS 4. Would probably take it from 10 minutes to 20 hours. So that's why it takes always so much longer when you are taking more FGS into account. And now I'm already forgetting about what we are talking about. Time flies when you are having fun. And there was a guy that was looking pretty fishy, so I think that he's going to be calling too much. But even from him, that's like 3%. That's going to be really a negligible amount that we are getting his bounty. I think like if I'm shoving pocket fours in here, I'm losing something like minus 0.15 because of the bounties. But it's going to be a negative shove with pocket fours, I think in general. So Calleon was completely correct that shoving pocket fours is not a good play. 3-9 off. This was an interesting situation. Like we need 39% just from pot odds point of view. But there will also be that if we are getting 39%, then we are also like ICM in this situation is probably going to be somewhere around 41 to 42% if we are looking at this spot in with ICM Explorer. But if we are taking the bounty into account, I think it goes back to about the chip equity. So I think we would want to play about the hands that we are getting about 39%. And Calleon says that have to get some supercomputer. I don't think a supercomputer would help that much when it's an when the algorithm speed is, or the calculations are exploding in pretty quickly. So you are like getting probably one hand to the future more if you are using the biggest supercomputer compared to your PC, but not that much more. And Neo quantum computer would not be quick in this situation. But let's see what hand the Hodder Resources calculator would give us. Let's start from it. And now it's the small blind that's going to be shoving into the big blind. But now we have had like something like a long explanation on how the FGS works and why the calculations are so slow. And Ahille said that play at least Nash perfectly and then you will make a lot of money. I don't think that you are making a lot of money if you are just playing Nash perfectly. But I think that you are making money in the lower levels. But I think that if you are playing good exploitative poker, it's going to be the best option. And there are some spots that you need to deviate from Nash, I think. The good point about Nash is that you don't need to think that much when you are playing Nash in some situations. You don't need to think more when you are deviating from Nash and what you are. But I think like if you are just playing Nash, you are using a stronger strategy and it's going to be stronger enough that I think that you should be able to beat the rake At least at least if your early game is good. But there will be some spots like how to play 10 to 20 big blinds deep that are going to be probably close as important as having a good shove fold game. Like in here, if Micton is opening 60%, then... And now it's going to be that it's going to be that he's opening, like when he's opening, then we'll need to just think about his open. And if we call, it's going to be like 100% times our equity, so we can take quite sizable minus equity in here. And it's actually going to be pretty close that if we are thinking that we are having about 40%, then we could, from napkin math, we could take something close to a -1 edge in this situation. So if we would be a bit on a safe side and we are taking into account, or taking the bounty into account, we could call something like 77%. That's great. But if our opponent knows that we are taking the bounty into account, then the opponent would adjust his own range. And when he's adjusting its own range, then we are having hands that are not going to be good enough. So then we are doing the same. We are adjusting our own range. And that's going to take quite a few steps, and the more times we are adjusting our own range, the closer we are getting to an as equilibrium. And actually, I think now we are quite close to as equilibrium because there are no really big... Like, this is practically also how Hold'em Resources works, like behind the scenes. It tries to adjust all the ranges until they are getting closer together. And now when we are willing to take a 0.8 minus EV, it would like lessen the Michton's opening range by 10%. He could shove 10% less, and we could still call. If he shoves 10% less, we can call something like 6% more. But 9-3 off is not something that we can call. If our opponent is taking the knockouts into account as well. It's like 60% to him to shove and 51% for me to call. I think with the taking the... I think when we are taking it into account that we are winning the bounty about 40% of the time. So, in this situation, I'm trying to notepad it. So, the bounty is worth about 2.5%. And if we are winning the bounty 40% of the time, we are getting additional 1% equity. And whoopee! But this is actually not completely correct. Because... that we are risking here our chance to get bounties next hand. So if we are losing this, we can't get bounties from anyone. if we are winning this, we are adding the all-in to our range of getting bounties from. But if we fold this, the next hand, we can shove pretty wide against this Perazzi. And we can also call Earl Water and Michton still wider because we are having more value in our hand. So it's not going to be easy to think about how to completely optimally play with knockouts. And it's going to be more or less not of an exact science, so there is a reason why I have used vague numbers and not even tried to calculate it completely correctly. Because when I know that it's going to be a Stetson calculation, that I'm getting a number out of a hat, then I know that I'm probably getting quite close, but then I'll also know that don't trust the number as a hard number. And as Neo said, that it would be really cool if HRC would have an option to take bounties into account. That would be really, really cool. Because that would probably also increase the skill level of those playing. It would probably increase the skill level of those playing these games. But this is something to think about when playing these knockouts, that I think if you are playing a solid 9-max strategy and not adjusting to the knockouts at all, I think you are still winning money in the games. You are losing out of some of the equity, but I think that the games are a bit softer. So you are getting more equity in getting softer games. I think some regs are avoiding these games for a reason that they are not playing perfectly, so it's going to be horrible for them to play. But I think that if you are playing a solid 9-max strategy, you are also being a winner in these. And if you are taking the knockouts correctly into account and you are thinking about the knockouts, I think that you are having a chance to have a higher expected ROI in knockouts than you would have in regular sit and goes. And I think like we have now looked through all of the hands that we marked during the session, so it's going to be the time again. If you are going to sleep, have a good night. If you are still planning to play some poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!